My name is Abhi Chinniah, and where I am from is a complex question. I was born in Christchurch and I grew up in Malaysia. I have Tamil Sri Lankan roots. Our migration story starts with my paternal grandfather. He migrated from Jaffna in Sri Lanka to Malaya at the time, now Malaysia. And much later, my father, he came to Christchurch, New Zealand as a student in 1973. And I was born in 1992 in Christchurch as well. I am a portrait photographer and sometimes writer. I love taking portraits of people. That is how I connect and build relationship. That's pretty much all I do is photograph people. I just love everything about it. I don't think there's a particular kind of person that I like to photograph. It's always a very organic and personal experience for me, how I come about photographing someone for a personal project, which has largely made up my body of work to date. I go by feeling and meeting people and later then photographing them in some capacity, and that's kind of how it happens. But I don't go out specifically thinking this is someone I want to photograph, or there is no wish list per se. So I have had 3 projects to date. My first project was called Light Skin, Dark Skin, and that was about colorism and the experiences women have had with skin discrimination in Aotearoa and abroad. And my second project, A Migrant's Path, was in some ways a continuation of Light Skin, Dark Skin, but there was more focus on the migration experience and what it means to keep your culture alive in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think a lot of that project tied into me exploring my lived experience, my father's migration story, which is tied a lot into what I do and why I do it. And my third project, my most recent one, which launched last year, Melanin Rising, was also about colorism. So there's a common theme in my work. And that followed the stories of 5 people and their experiences with having dark skin and what that's meant for them and the use of skin lightening products and how the media ties into how we feel about our skin. So I've brought a couple of portraits to show everyone watching. They're both from my project, A Migrant's Path. This one in particular was photographed in 2020, in July 2020. And that was a particular memorable time. I think we'd just come down to level 2 in our COVID lockdown, and it was a really strange time because there was a lot of unknowns and I was already feeling really separated from my family. So the theme of this was samatva, which is the essence of being. That's what it basically meant. So she's on a path and she's on a journey of self-discovery, and all of my models wear traditional and cultural outfits that are personal to them and that they own. And that just adds an element of storytelling that I like. I like to engage with something with a history and heritage, and that's really important for me in my work. So that was one of them. And my other one, a portrait of my dear friend Fatumata. We photographed this in January 2021, and it was a beautiful, warm, summery day. It was a really, really nice day. And Fatumata's sister was also in these photos, but the portrait that made it into the show was just a single portrait of Fatumata, which has been quite a popular one, actually. Yeah. So that's what I've got. A lot of my work to date has been around colorism, and that is because my whole life has been based on the color of my skin, and that was pointed out to me at a very young age. I had a short amount of time in Christchurch, and then My schooling and what I call my formative years were in Malaysia, and in both places, all of my memories have been around how dark I was and how I had to change that. And because my photography is so tied to who I am, it's been my therapy in a way. It's helped me put language to it. And I've been thinking about this and why I have been so driven to do what I'm doing with so much passion. And it's emotion, and didn't have the awareness of how to put this into a thought process. So I'm very driven by my emotions, and I still don't quite have the language for it, but photography really, really has helped me massively, and learning other people's journeys and knowing that while we may come from a different cultural background, we may have had a different upbringing, we are tied to being in New Zealand. And that's something that's quite remarkable, I think, all of these journeys coming together. Because I didn't grow up seeing people that looked like me in magazines being photographed in what you may call a documentary style of photography, I'm still trying to figure out what my style of photography is. They were given no agency to tell their story, and I'd look at an image and you'd have to make up what you thought their life was or what their story was. And that's why it's so important for me in my work that I give my models and my portrait sitters, I prefer to call them portrait sitters than models, to be honest, the opportunity to tell their story and have their words heard. And I want to have their perspective. That's a really, really important thing for me. So what you'll see in a lot of my work is that you'll have the portrait, but you'll also have a written element that goes with it, because you look at their face and then you hear their story. Better yet, if I can get an audio recording of them talking. And I've never quite had the budget for it, but what I would love to have is my shows being shown in a mixed format way, because a lot of my work has video, there's oral recordings and the essays, and I'd love to have kind of like a production of the work where it's multi-sensory and you walk in and you see a portrait and you hear their voices coming out of nowhere, and I think that would be really beautiful. I've got all the ideas that I'd love to put to life, and just having the opportunity to do that and to keep my work going around colorism. And I'd love to travel and learn more about how skin discrimination has affected people, because it has affected people in ways that we still don't really understand or are aware of. And it's a very, very important conversation for me. And I don't think it'll ever move away from my work. I think my work will always touch on colorism in some way, because it is who I am.